Hello everybody. Today I'd like to talk about the concept of the cordycept, Cordycept. I started learning about the cordycept in 2005, way before I understood anything about narcissism, and strangely enough there is a relation. At that time, having had some awareness of the fact that the gut has something to do with all of the anxiety that I was experiencing above and beyond what was real, I investigated the yeast-borne fungus known as Candida. And in my studies of Candida, I realized that this thing was actually an intelligent life form, and that it had the capacity to chemically train the brain to sustain it via the human's cravings for foods that would supplement its diet. So I was quite interested in that, and I was working on all of that while at the same time still being patently unaware of the fact that in reality I'd just been chronically abused, and I had no concept of the depth of that because I had nothing to measure off. So where else did I find the cordyceps? Another one was a cordycept. I then went into the insect world, and there was another cordycept that takes over ants and cicadas and basically eats them alive while training them to do their job, basically. That was interesting. Then I came to narcissism as a cordycept, and I'd realised that I'd been doing this study as a warm-up to the human variant of a cordycept in action, and the effect is very similar in that the only difference really is that the narcissist only needs proximity to infect and affect. These other things are by physical contact, but at the same time there is a lure, just the same as the narcissist, for the insect to go towards the live virus, and also for the yeast to train the body and to infect the brain into subordination. So I was taking all those bits on bit by bit as I was quite fractured and obviously still in self-protection. But what I've noticed with this narcissistic cordycept is it will start forming a shadow in a person that's totally undetected, as I said, at any age. And this shadow will be unrequited. And it also works as part of a cordycept act or action as a response or resistance response, or a misaligned program created through maligned input. Yes, it builds its own security system, the narcissistic situation, in that the gaslighting itself is part of the cordycept effect. By anytime there's any sort of clarity, the damage that the narcissist has created and the brain and body's response will negate clarity, forming amnesia or dissonance and dissociation, which are all just levels of amnesia, really. It's eyes open amnesia, eyes closed amnesia. So in understanding that proximity is all you need, and that repetition is the ingression, repeated situations of untenability and incapability to process, the mind will fuse even the logic, having been locked out of the feeling body, won't be able to interpret because it's getting two inputs at the same time. And this is part of how the narcissist will remain incognito in situations, because the target will look and act discombobulated. This is very natural for any human being going through this sort of process. It's essentially an internal war zone, if prolonged, and neurotransmitters tend to shrink, dissipate, and other ones grow around the trauma and anxiety, so the triggers become more effective, and there's a point at which there's no real defense against these things without awareness. No amount of logic will prevent the shadow from absorbing the toxin from these people, while at the same time creating a fuse in which the target will not have any sense of escape, or feasible escape anyway. It becomes a loop in their head of what do I do, what do I do? And in that situation they become atrophied on all levels, and that's how we find so many speechless, destitute people who can't really describe what they've been through, as they don't believe anyone would understand. And there's a great possibility that people wouldn't, because there might be an activation within these people around similar abuse or trauma, or, as I said, the perception reality thing cutting in, the security system cutting in to accept horror but not terror, not real stuff. Yes, it's a self-sustaining situation, this one, in that even when the target has escaped, that's only the beginning of recognition and healing. As was in my situation, I had to face my greatest terrors outside to eventually realise how many I'd housed within myself and how many I had to work on by myself, as a byproduct of the hangover of this experience forming in patterning and responses and behaviours which are now no longer necessary but still enact in familiar situations of exposure and having to perform a lot for these people, because anyone who's been around a lot of narcissists is very hypersensitive to crowds, and people with PTSD will look at people a lot. They'll look at the movements because that's what they've been trained to do at home. It's some people would think that they're rubbernecking, but the truth is it's their nervous system going off, and they're ensuring that they're safe all the time. And this is a lot of what society misses too. It's all interpreted as something else, and I mean, sometimes it is people rubbernecking, but you can see the difference really in the eyes. So there's a very interesting subject to pop into my head that many years ago. And now we've come to Neuralink, which is the synthetic version of pretty much what I was talking about as far as I'm concerned. I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand its supposed capabilities to assist people in regenerating atrophied illnesses, injuries, but it goes much further than that. A lot of our education is really similar. It is. It's something that stays with you, and you defend it, and you don't know anything else. And so there's a bit of a theme running through all this beyond the beyond the fungus, beyond the insect control, and beyond the narcissistic effect of indoctrination, of fads, of fashion, music. It's all been supplanted with something that leans towards subordination and following, and that's the next one I'll come to, is this following thing. They only need one strong leader for a lot of people to follow, and I take following from where I come from quite offensively. I don't really follow anyone after where I've been. I follow wisdom, but this following thing is, people are really concerned about the wolf in the story, but no one seems to talk about the fact that the shepherd eats all of the sheep, and he's the good shepherd, and he's the one that he's built the trust of his flock to live under his care and die by his hand at his desire. That would be a form of cordycept type behaviour. And this is where I must admit, during all this sort of stuff, I did look at a lot of farming and that sort of thing, and I thought, this is abhorrent now to me, having also been part in it for years, and the amount that I'd seen led me to believe that this wasn't really that kind, and that I'd seen my lovely brother make friends with his cows so that he could call them down the hill, and then rob their babies and leave the mother outside the yard bellowing for a week. And I'd think, and this is meant to be, you know, the caring side of farming stuff, and I thought, well, this is just more programming, really, because I was still appreciating the trust, and then listening to the bellowing, I was, so this is a bit like society, you know. Controversial, but I'll say it now. When we're born with a placenta, which comes out with a cord attached to it, as we all know, which is attached for a reason, as is the placenta, because the baby's still breathing through the placenta. It's not quite ready for air yet, and it doesn't need to be, because it's still getting the air through the blood of the placenta, and all the stem cells and all the last of the nutrients, and that's their last whack of new stem cells. And to have that cut off by professionals saying this is procedure, and then with boys to have them whipped away and cut the skin off the end of their penis, saying that the child doesn't feel anything. I'm not sure I've heard a child actually mention anything about pain or no pain. So this is a form of implied amnesia to reduce guilt and shame for something that is totally unnecessary, and a child suffering 2 injuries of separation, once from what's left of its connection to its mother and to its sovereignty, and then the next time to its sexual organ, which is all about creation and confidence and moving forward in life. All smells a bit cordyceptic control by misinformation, and crowd agreement without any reflection. Oh no, it's just what you do. What? As far as I'm concerned, we all come out perfect. And any unnecessary treatment after that is a violation of that child. Because parents need to understand this now, is that they have the child, but they don't own the child. They are carers of the child, because if they own the child, there's probably every chance that that child has, without really expansive parents, little chance of becoming anything else but a clone of their parent. In the non-questioning, subjugation and compliance department. Yeah, I was just about to go on a rant then. I'm still wondering, and this is a segue, and I apologise for this, but I believe this is a cordyceptic type experience too. But this acceptance of the downplaying of women, which has happened ad infinitum, and has now been accepted as the status quo, I'm wondering about the origins, more than what's happening now that there's been so many generations of humans that have come through with this concept, this Cordy concept of inequality as a basis, not to be questioned, has me wondering if this is a quintessential imbalancing of man and woman by authorities, by the knowledge bringers that do as I say-as. And women have, well, some women have had a bit of a crack at talking about it, and there hasn't been much help from men, because obviously there's a bias towards keeping this situation effective. Because the way I see it, what we've actually done is, not what we've done, what has happened, what's been created, is that women have been pushed into subordination. So much of their expression has to be passive, otherwise they're not a woman. And more often than not, a good woman will regulate her man into better decision making. But not if they're feeling suppressed and incapable of being heard on any level of reality. I mean, they are the bringers of life. You'd pretty much want them to be happy in procreation, yeah, because then you have a healthier society. And you know, from my very twisted background, I've watched this my whole life, and you know, this is part of what's blown me out too. Is it's just been accepted. It's been status quo, and I've had no concept of healthy woman. And then I start to think, well, there'd be very little chance of me to have concept of healthy woman, given the requirements that they've been born into, having to learn how not to be who they are to be acceptable, having to follow a nuance of society's dictates to achieve some level of value, which to me sounds very transactional in the first place. And then you're going to get a woman who's, and I'm not going to stereotype here, I'm just talking psychology, because I know there are others. You get a woman who's turned on herself in her want to self-liberate and also her want to self-subjugate, caught between the two polarities again. I suppose that's why they call it duality, isn't it? But I really think that all these things need to be looked at a grassroots level. Because he said we should act anyway, but the way we want. Unless it's improper, which means you have to grow a conscience. And as we know in this world, if you do something wrong, you'll find a lot of people who'll tell you about it. They're the first to let you know by energy or otherwise. And when you do something good, you'll probably find one, and that ratio is probably pretty realistic too, because the level of programming that's gone on out there with people believing that they actually know what they're talking about, know what they're doing, which actually creates hubris in people. And also what's that one called? Anyway, it was a saying about people being so indentured into their belief systems that they think they're really intelligent, but they're actually working from pure stupidity. Dunning-Kruger effect, that's the one. So then we come into transgenderism. What was that push for? Because it wasn't a societal push for all the kids to suddenly start having sex changes. I think that this is a nuanced subliminal drive for the, and bless their hearts, the chronically unhappy with who they are essentially, thinking that mutilating themselves on the outside is going to change their insides. I've heard a lot of disturbing reactions to this too, in hindsight, which is always 2020. I've got 2020 hindsight now, and it's not very pleasant, but it's completely accurate. Yeah, so sexuality and roles, when we've been enrolled into a society that's dictated, and you know, in my days it was the newspaper and the television, and these days it's the internet. How can people not be affected if they're connected? Really? And that's why I've always used social media as a point of human learning, more than a want to accrue fake friends and get likes and loves for showing off, or for being beneficial. But I actually did a test in 2019 where I purposefully did one of those posts and got 1,200 likes or something. I felt my body change, and I thought, oh, here we go. Okay, this is like me fiddling with my adrenal glands when I was a kid after trauma, right? And then I thought, and then we go and see all the MMA and people bashing each other and things like that, and I realised too again that was another trauma-based pursuit of mine, which I rarely did, but and why I really did it was I became increasingly aware of what it did to my body every time I was watching people pulverise each other, because I've seen it a lot and I can't remember it, and I can remember it. And it's different when you don't have a screen between you. And the emanations that come from these sort of things, as I said, are pretty much like you're back in it, apart from you're sitting still, gyrating. wondering what you're doing to yourself and what you're trying to learn, and how other people feel about this, how their body responds. I mean, we've got adrenaline junkies that do amazing things, amazing sports and challenges, and I don't know how many of them are super healthy either. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe they're just beating the fear, but there's still addiction to adrenaline through that. So the cordyceps becomes the thrill in this regard. I kind of believe this also about womanizing men, is that it becomes a game of numbers due to the fact that it's more about the hunt than the kill. It's a terrible way of saying it. It's more about the catch than the keep, I should say. Pardon me. And I see and I read about women's polarity, in that they will, and I'm stereotyping here, I'm not meaning to, I'm just expunging what I remember. Women interviewed a lot these days will be asked, what sort of man do they want, and they'll say this, and then you ask them what their last 3 lovers have been like, and they're totally the opposite. And you know that the shadow's working in between, because both are fantasies, and somewhere in between is probably what they want. But when the in-between can't be found, the extremes will. Same in all of us, and I've always felt great compassion for women in this regard, and I think this is part of my respect-based, not objectifying, and also keeping myself safe, but having a great reverence for the creators, for the female creators of this earth, and what it would be like had they been allowed to be without formation. Without modern formation. I think there would be a lot more dynamism and a lot more love in the world, a lot more genuine love, because at the end of the day, a woman's intuition is being closer to love by nature. That's why they're softer. That's why they're more able to look in, and they work through emotions. They live in the waters. And man's greatest fear is being seen by a real woman, because he always feared that authenticity would get him dumped, and that being seen in his imperfection might even be too much for him. But this is the yielding that's necessary in the alchemy of real love, away from this cordyceptic situation whereby we've been trained how to do it, and we're all the same, but we're a little bit different, and the difference is what's to be celebrated, not so much the similarity. The similarities are familiarity. The differences are dynamic and appreciable by it affecting another part of your brain and creating chemicals in the stomach that would opportune situations where neurotransmitters start to reintegrate and search for new connection, or to reconnect with something that was always there in remembering, by the reconstitution of ease and grace through authenticity and love, compassion, respect for your fellow man and woman, and for the children especially. This is what builds a good environment. Part of what blew me out about this Cordyceps style stuff for me was the amount of times I asked people for help when I was younger about really simple things, and my curiosity at why there was so much resistance to there being any answer to these questions that I'd asked. Simple questions, you know. And part of the reason I stopped asking these questions to my friends, or, you know, beyond the family, which was a waste of time, to friends or anything, was because I'd never get a response and I'd feel quite exposed. And later on I realised that this is a cordyceps of jealousy and envy, because they didn't want me to know the simple things so I couldn't be better than them. And I wasn't asking to be better than anyone. I was asking for a leg up from a friend and a little bit of advice. And to tell you the truth, in the end, that would have affected my gut biome and my mind to the point where asking was not just a mission impossible on the inside job, it was a mission impossible on the outside job. It's extremely tiring to never have known attachment and to understand the need for attachment to grow, and then to have to concede to learning detachment first. But the truth is, there was no attachment because there was nothing healthy to attach to. So in reality, I did myself a favour in only being amnesic rather than subordinate to a never-ending self-perpetuating nightmare of someone else's experience being lived in my head through my consent. So yeah, I'm going right back on all this stuff, and Adam and Eve and all this bloody garbage. We've been programmed to breed to be easy to control so that we do what we're told en masse. And the more we do it, every generation loses more control and loses more concept of control within their own environment. Meanwhile, on the inside, they're voraciously trying to control the sensations that are coming from them, which are often found in what is offered by the very people that caused the issue, because they have a great understanding of human psychology, and they've worked heavily on ego, but even more heavily on shadow. You know, back in the days of the philosophers, there was a good percentage of people who used to speak, and they'd all come together and talk and speak their wisdom, and if there was a better answer, then they would concede by intelligence, by respect of greater knowledge. And even Socrates came to the point when he'd spoken enough knowledge, and eventually his friends had offered him to drink the poison or revoke his words. And Socrates' internal dialogue to that was, well, if you don't take my words, then you're not my friends. If you're not my friends, then what's this been? And if this has been nothing, then I'll just drink the poison. And of course, at that point, they were all, oh no, don't do that. But because they knew that what they'd done was they'd killed the source by basically offering him to renounce himself. as a form of self-saving, which is actually, to Socrates, the murder of his will to live. Complicated. All these men talking about all this stuff. Even in the Bible, we're starting to see the re-emergence of Mary Magdalene and other women who've been deleted, who were never part of a religious movement anyway. And we hear about the Gnostics and Sophia, and that understanding, that also rings very true. Being a woman, or a goddess, or a aeon, really, breaking code and creating from herself, which created an Ouroboros of a person, of a offspring deity. This Ouroboros this Ouroboros is no different to the Ouroboros of narcissism. The over-doting mother in this situation that creates a self-fueled psychopath who believes that everything that was created by him, and therefore everything that he sees is owned by him. Does this strike any parallels? And the other funny one was with Narcissus. He had the beautiful face and the beautiful voice, and he'd call out, and Echo was her name, ironically. And Echo fell in love with the sound and not the actuality. And he drew all the beauty from her until she was a vapid, useless, wretched thing. And then when she was all used up, he managed to fall into the river looking at his own reflection and drowned. This is all pretty current and ancient, and there is no time in this regard because there's nothing new under the sun. This has all been done before. This is now just being done with iPads, and it's just different technology, but it's the same blueprint essentially. And usually when civilizations come to this level of mayhem, we're on the verge of a clean-up, which we're seeing already. And we're once again being pushed to the outside to look at all the happenings at the expense of internal world and dialogue, of correct interpretation of experience and the resulting ease of emotion by sense of knowing, rather than living in a perpetual subliminal question which has to be ignored because there is no feasible answer. And there is no feasible answer, that's right. But it's important to stop the question and just be. With that, I'm going to take off. Good to see you, people. Big love. Cheers.